Hey guys, welcome back and Happy New Year! It's been 10 months since my last update and I know some of you have been wondering what happened. Hell, some maybe even thought that things went downhill or ended completely. But none of it did. To make it clear from the get-go, the project isn't dead nor am I. I simply had a very busy and intense year full of changes, which made making progress at devlogging lose quite some importance. But I am back now, stronger and more determined than ever. I want to take a moment to explain further before I start showing the progress on the game. This chapter will be a bit more on the personal side. Feel free to skip this part if you just want to see all the new stuff. Over the turn of the year from 2023 to 2024, I realized that I needed to make some drastic changes in my life in order to continue. Changes I'd been putting off for far too long. Game development had to take a back seat while I literally rearranged my whole life. When I looked at where I was a year ago, I felt stuck. Creatively, personally, and also professionally, and finally decided it was time to break out of that hopeless cycle. To be very specific, I literally turned my entire life around, and here's what I was up to. Initially, I bought a new car. I was still driving my first car from when I was starting out driving. This doesn't seem like much, but having a fine and functioning car with a bunch of extras is quite a luxury. I simply couldn't stand to look at my old car anymore because it reminded me of the past too much. Next up, I finally switched things regarding my career and full-time job as a software developer. I am now working at a different company since I wasn't happy with my old employer anymore. This switch has resulted in a major salary raise, and I'm also working only 4 days a week by now to have more time for my true passions and creative stuff like game development, for example. The hurdle? Switching a job is a major hustle. You have to evaluate a lot, talk to a lot of people, gamble to some extent, make the leap, and also actually arrive at a new job. But all of this has been done by now. I'm fully happy with my new employer and glad that I found the courage to jump out of my comfort zone. Things paid off already. After that, I bought a completely new working rig for game development. My old computer was too slow to do proper game dev on it. This new rig was the first positive consequence of the job change because I simply earned more money. The new rig definitely has it way easier to deal with the giant and still growing codebase of my game. Once I switched my employer, I went another major step out of my comfort zone by moving into a new home. The cost of living as a single person is simply too high for my taste, which is why I'm dividing these by now with another person. There has also been scorched earth left behind in my old apartment, which is why I as well couldn't stand it anymore. I was urgently in need of a lot of fresh air. Music has always been a passion of mine too, but this year I took it seriously. I went from simply playing the rock and metal guitar for fun to songwriting and producing. It's been a way to recharge creatively while staying connected to my artistic side. I have also been talking to a metal band in order to join them as a guitarist. It didn't work out unfortunately, but I still gained some cool new memories and contacts in the process. Speaking of contacts, over the course of the whole last year I was cutting ties with people who no longer aligned with my goals and values. This is a hard but necessary step when growing up, I guess. But on the flip side, I am also very grateful for a bunch of new and supportive connections with people that inspire me and accept me for the person I am. And last but not least, while speaking of me, in order to fully disconnect from my old self, I also completely overhauled my physical appearance over the last year. I describe myself as a metalhead who plays and creates video games in his free time, and I am finally looking like one too. Besides that, I also made a couple of big and life-lasting decisions that finally had to be made. So yeah, I really think that there isn't anything left that could have been changed, and of course, all of these changes were expensive, tough and time-consuming. But they were worth it. With my life in a better place and all of the struggle defeated, I can now dedicate my full attention to dev Scourges and creativity in general. Now there is just one thing left, finishing this game. I literally have nothing planned for 2025 other than focusing on finishing and releasing Dev Scourges. With all of that being said, let's dive into all of the progress and changes I have been managing to implement over the last 10 months while turning my life around. The first big changes are located at the AI teammates and the squad in general. It received a major visual overhaul. Their old appearance almost looked like a joke, as if they sent some rookies to do the job, but the Dev Scourges, hence the name, are precisely engineered killer machines instead, so it was about time they also felt like it. The squad members' old looks were also too disconnected to each other. I tried to make them look like they belonged to the same squad while still retaining some individuality. I beefed up the members and made them look more heavy by adding more armor and tech elements, which underlines their synthetic origin. Everyone also got a personalized melee weapon now. The Overwatch units from the Half-Life universe were my main point of inspiration here. They also received a new mask shader, heavier footsteps, and a completely new animation set for their locomotion. I also added some normal map magic in order to make it look like they're wearing Kevlar. Each squad member also has gotten an overhaul in terms of voicing. I've been switching to AI-generated voices for each of them, which is quite fitting, since they're not actually human. I've also been carefully crafting 4 different voice filters using Vocal Synth 2, a phenomenal plugin for morphing and distorting any voice. Take a listen.
Follow me. Copy that. Defend the spot. Positive.
Unfortunately, I also had to make some cuts. The reviving and tasking mechanics in my game introduced more complexity and damage than they brought use in terms of gameplay depth. So I decided to scratch these completely. This means that the AI teammates are basically invincible by now. You still have control over them with the order system, but they won't take any damage anymore. To counteract and balance this, I added a simple mechanic, ammo consumption. Each squad mate is now slowly decreasing in ammo when firing. Once they're out of ammo, you guessed it, they're unable to shoot and they become drastically less effective. I added some ammunition depots throughout the game, which replenishes their ammo. I will still try and see how this new concept plays out, but I think it's not too bad of a way to balance the AI teammates. Lastly, 3 of them also received new names. The team's captain is from now on called Havoc, the assassin of the team listens to Scythe, and the scientist's name is Pulse. Nitro is still Nitro and remains the head of Demolishing. Let's talk about the art style and visual effects now. I've been revisiting the order system and added a bunch of fancy particles as feedback upon giving orders. Issuing commands feels way more meaningful now and it also looks super fancy. In addition, I've been dumping the volumetric fog that has been present in the game. The asset I've been using simply wasn't compatible with some other assets in the project. That's just the patchwork curse of Unity, but it is what it is. I went for an advanced screen space fog shader instead, which also yields great visual results and is way cheaper on the GPU. And speaking of post-processing, I've also been digging myself into shaders and how to paint pixels. I added a near-death effect when the player's health is approaching a critical level. The filter focuses on heavy desaturation and reduces the color depth. I think it turned out pretty cool. There's now a quad with a smoke texture flashing in front of the gun when shooting for a very brief moment, which adds way more impact to the shots. I also did the same with a refraction shader on it in order to mimic heat distortion. You don't actively notice these since they only exist for a couple of milliseconds, but they definitely add to the feel. I also added bullet traces to every shooting team member, which helps to clarify which teammate is shooting which enemy. I added these back in 2024 when Helldivers 2 took off. I just found these traces so cool to look at. They are purely visual though, and have no actual gameplay impact. Shooting is still hit scan and not projectile based. The loot indicators have also undergone a major overhaul. They are way fancier now and even animated. Different colors signal different item types, and the style overall fits quite nicely into my lo-fi realism art style. The husk enemy has also gotten a new shader, which includes a noise-based layer of bloodstains. The amount of blood now directly correlates to the remaining health points of the enemy and updates every time he takes damage. The bloodier he is, the closer he is to giving in. Okay, now on to gameplay, which has easily undergone the biggest amount of changes. In case you didn't know, Unity is giving away a free asset in the asset store each week. Last week they gave away a very clean full body knife animation set. It felt heaven sent since I had an internal conflict going on for quite some time now about whether I should re-add melee to the game or not. It was also quite tricky since my whole animation system is a very specific and permanent blend of regular animations, inverse kinematics and manual transformations in the late update. So I was really struggling to come up with a way to add melee without breaking everything and also make it look decent. It definitely was needed from a design point of view. If the player somehow ran completely out of ammo, he wasn't able to inflict any other damage and needed to rely on his AI teammates, until now at least. The player is now able to pull his melee weapon in any situation. The blade is an exotic Tonfa-style blade inspired by Karl Ruprecht Krönen from Hellboy. I think it's such a unique design and therefore a perfect fit for a captain of an undead cyborg assassin squad. The player can use the blade to damage enemies and open crates. Channeling the technical artist in me, I also added a cool shader which allows the blade to be stained in blood when used extensively. The blade of course also remains on the character when not in use, just like firearms. The player has also gained access to another new ability when having the knife equipped, the knife run. I was just fiddling around with the new animations and found the running knife animation perfect for my game, since at the end of the day all of them are trained assassins that are also extremely efficient in close combat, so this presented as a perfect opportunity to let that shine through. The knife run is the fastest way to move in the game and it sacrifices firepower for mobility and agility. It gives the player the opportunity to quickly reposition or navigate through or around targets, if he is in need of doing so. Another thing I added was crouching. Crouching is quite the opposite of the knife run. It sacrifices mobility for precision. The player instantly gains precision when crouching, which helps in taking precise and clean shots. Every gun has also gotten its own aiming stance when crouched. It definitely plays and feels very pleasing. I even felt like John Wick in certain moments during playtests. Okay, so I added a lot of new stuff in the movement department, that's cool, but it's kinda overwhelming now. If the player wanted, he can run around the level in a cracked up Call of Duty type of manner. I decided that it was about time to add one of the most ancient video game resources to the project, stamina. OGs really remember this one. I had it in the game in the very beginning, but back in the day I added it for the sake of adding it. Now it's actually needed to balance and regulate the gameplay. In short, certain actions now have a set stamina cost and can't be executed if there isn't any stamina left. These actions include regular running with an equipped firearm, knife running, performing melee attacks, entering the crouch stance, and performing a combat kick. Stamina replenishes slowly if it hasn't been drained for a short amount of time. The player has a thing to micromanage here, which adds even another bit of depth. I added a small stamina bar in the UI and also auditive feedback if an action can't be executed due to being out of stamina. To elevate the gunplay even further, I have been adding a major feature to the ballistics: bullet penetration. Bullets are now able to penetrate multiple targets at once, which creates another new layer of depth. The player might be able to save ammo if he takes his angle of attack into account. The damage and penetration probability falls off exponentially for every penetrated enemy, but there are a few exceptional guns that can cause massive amounts of collateral damage. Just like in real life, shotguns are rather bad at penetrating, whereas sniper rounds pierce through their targets like it's nothing. And speaking of snipers, I also finally found the courage to add manual action firearms to the game. I simply wanted a sniper in the game, now that penetration is possible, and also due to the devastating efficiency of the squad. So I extended my procedural reloading system and recycled the animations that were already in place into a repeating one. New guns making use of this mechanic are a sniper rifle and a pump action shotgun. I also placed a small indicator in the UI which reminds the player of an imminent repetition. By now, I am also punishing the player by not taking care of remaining ammo in the current magazine. If the player manages to completely empty his current mag, the reloading time increases by a fraction since the whole gun needs to be fully reloaded and chambered, although I have no concept of chambering. It's just another micromanagement thing and detail I could add very easily. The sniper felt quite powerful, but it was lacking one more thing that it was supposed to be good at: distance. So in order to make full use of such an efficient weapon, I've been also adding the ability to zoom to the game. I kept it really simple though, it's just an adjustment of the camera field of view, but it gets the job done. The DMR and the sniper rifle have gotten major magnifications, whereas all other regular guns can only zoom in for a little bit. And since we are already talking about guns, I've been completely overhauling all firearms. Most models got swapped out, so all of them look more coherent, and I also tweaked many performance values for various guns. I also tried to strive away from classic guns and guns that everyone associates with Resident Evil to find my own unique identity. In addition, almost all gun attachments have been removed as well. Only the starting guns are highly modded, since these act as a standard gear for the squad, which is designed to be as efficient and tactical as possible. All other guns will be obtained through high-tech manufacturing using a futuristic 3D printer. Therefore, only the vanilla gun is being printed without any attachments. I also found it a bit unfair to force a weapon variant onto the player that he can't edit himself or maybe even finds ugly, so I will go for the clean and tidy approach here. Last but not least, in order to slow down the pace of the game a bit, I've been adding trip mines to the game. I went for a classic claymore mine in this case. These will be placed throughout the game, so the player has a motivation to not breach every room like Rambo. The claymore, just like in real life, has a blast cone. You won't take any harm as long as you can't read the iconic imprint. My whole damage system is making use of interfaces. A neat side effect of this code abstraction was this chain reaction. Okay, let's talk about the auditive stuff briefly. I've been completely redesigning all gun sounds as well. The old gun sounds were way too flat and not punchy at all. I sucked up a lot of knowledge regarding sound design, production and processing over the last year. and the gun sounds proved to be an excellent exercise to apply all my new know-how. I layered a lot of different firing sounds, used a bunch of compression as well as saturation to glue it all together, and also sprinkled in some unusual sounds to give every sound a bit of a personality. I think the new sounds are great and they surely add to the juicy feel of the guns. Besides that, I have also started working on a theme for the game. I won't bother you with music theory here, since this one is still quite in the making, but I'll give you a sneak peek. Next, let's have a look at my least favorite part of game development, user interface. I completely redesigned the squad icons. They now have a slightly distorted appearance. I also added information about their names and their remaining ammunition. They definitely fit way better into the existing UI art style. Besides that, I also reworked the whole settings menu. I've been using a modular asset here which works quite well. And I also already went through the headache of making it work. So all settings are already functioning and are being saved and loaded into a config file. It's still around only about 90% complete, but more than suitable for future playtests and demos. And that's already it regarding the UI, for this devlog at least. UI challenges for the near future will be the save game screen as well as the rework of the Chronoforge UI. Not making any pauses here, let's talk about world building. If you remember, I initially planned 2 enemy factions for the game. The infested faction, who consisted of humans and animals who got turned into monsters by the alien fungus, and the security drone faction, which were supposed to fight back against the infestation. I made the decision to completely remove the drone faction from gameplay. They will take a major role in the lore, but are fully cut as an enemy for simplicity reasons. Organic faction battling is a complex thing, and since I actually want to release Dev Scourges eventually, I have to make some cuts in order to move on more quickly. But fear not, the robots will play an even bigger role in my next big project. Cutting the robots means I can fully focus on designing and adding infested enemies and simply letting them loose onto the squad. Speaking of them, here's a new enemy, the infested dog. It basically replaces the jump charge from my previous devlog. It moves and dies quickly, but has potential for massive damage since it's chemically loaded and explodes easily. You better be focusing on these or regret it otherwise. I have also 2 major tasks planned regarding the infested enemies. A full overhaul of the regular husk enemy. The current iteration is quite fun to play against, especially with all of the ragdoll behavior, but it's still very buggy and glitchy, due to the historical growth. So I have to basically revisit every aspect here and clean everything up so they behave correctly and coherently. In addition, I want to add the final infested enemy, a flying fungus spore-like enemy, but I am still concepting on this front for now. Speaking of concepts, I have also been iterating on an end boss design. Initially, I was going to let the main antagonist of the game pilot a mech which had to be fought at the climax of the game's story, but this felt kinda over the top. Instead, I am going to introduce the main antagonist Dr. Victor Voss and his two bodyguards early in the game. Said bodyguards are experimental fungus machine hybrids of Voss and will act as separate mini-bosses throughout the story, whereas Voss himself and his superhuman strength will test your skills in the very end phase of the game. Almost like another title I drew a significant amount of inspiration from. Good progress on the main laboratory level has also been made. I laid down the layout and structure of the level. I also came up with a very cool and mesmerizing reactor design for the whole research facility. This one will also play a role in the story, but the whole level is still a very big work in progress for now. To slowly end this XXL devlog, I wanted to briefly talk about the future of this project. As stated in the beginning, I basically allocated all of my free time for working on the project and finishing it. I really want to finish Scourges since I already have a very clear vision for my next project. I've been already creating a very detailed 55-page long game design document for the game I'll be creating after Scourges is done. The next entry will be playing in the same universe as Scourges and also take place after the events of the current game. So building a strong foundation now in terms of the game itself and also the lore is essential for the journey ahead. And to say it up front, it won't be Scourges 2. I'm so done with third-person animations for now. My desire to continue my game dev journey on another front really motivates me to finish Scourges. It's great, but also kinda toxic. I am working harder to work more in the future, I guess. Anyway, I definitely don't want to abandon anything or work on two projects simultaneously, which is why I'm fully locked in on grinding Scourges into a releasable state. There's still plenty of work to be done. Revisiting a bunch of dusty corners, finalizing levels, implementing input rebinding and revamping the save and load system once the gameplay is fully locked in. Balancing, testing, optimizing and polishing will remain ongoing processes as I push through this final stretch of development. Two short mentions regarding my marketing strategy. There is still a Steam Next Fest entry left open for the future, which I still want to take into account. I also created a separate Steam page for the prologue of my game. I will release this one for free in the future in order to gain some reach and spread the word directly through the Steam algorithm. I really want to finish this game first before I go and announce anything. So at first I will grind this game into being polished and playable, and then, only then, I will go heads first into marketing and announce a release date. Never ever will I announce a release date when there's still any major tasks open. That's cringe, bro. Like, I am not a AAA studio. Let's make this final push one to remember. Lastly, I wanted to thank everyone who believed and still believes in the project. Thanks to everyone for sticking around, and also thanks to everyone new here on my channel. Feel free to wishlist both games on Steam if you want to support my work for free. I won't promise anything here. I don't know when the next devlog will be coming or when the game releases, but be sure that I won't stop progressing because by now, game development has literally become a part of me and a part of my life. Thanks to everyone, have a great and productive year, go hunt those bugs, and as always, don't spill your beer.